In October 2017, Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf wrote, "This past summer, our family had a wonderful opportunity to visit some early church history sites in the eastern United States. In a special way, we relived the history of that time. People I had read so much about, people like Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, and Thomas B. Marsh, became more real to me as we walked where they walked and pondered the sacrifices they made to build the kingdom of God. My own experiences affirm what Elder Uchtdorf taught. I vividly remember as a 15-year-old, my parents taking some of my siblings and me to visit church history sites. When we visited Adam-ondi-Ahman, I felt an incredible spirit of peace. There's something special about being in the place where sacred events have or will occur. While not everyone is in a position to do so, if we are able to visit church history sites, how can we get the most from the experience? That's something that Dr. Mary Jane Woodger and some of her colleagues have explored in their book series, Search, Ponder, and Pray, a guide for travel and study. The purpose of this series is to provide background and teachings that can help people better understand what happened at different historical sites. After all, we're not all church historians, and it can be hard to understand the meaning of each site without additional guidance.
I remember going to sites, and we would just hope there would be someone there who would, know the background of the site, and we'd kind of, hitch ourselves on the tour and act like we were supposed to belong, And then if we ended up somewhere where there wasn't a tour, then my dad would try and fish into his vast, limited memory of what happened there, and we just thought, wouldn't it be wonderful, especially in this age, to provide something as if you had the best tour guide possible?
In this episode of Why Religion, Dr. Woodger shares insights that can help us better understand the power that can come from being on church history sites and how to maximize our experiences when we're there. I'm your host, Professor John Hilton, and this is Why Religion.
Each year, religion professors at Brigham Young University produce hundreds of publications on subjects related to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This podcast brings this research into one place to enlighten the everyday seeker of truth.
Seek learning, even by study and also by faith.
Interviewing the author, we discuss why the study was done, why it matters, and why the professor chooses to be both a scholar and a disciple. This is Why Religion. Research to enlighten your mind.
Today, Dr. Woodger will be interviewed by her religious education colleague, Dr. Casey Griffiths, about the recently published series, Search, Ponder, and Pray, a guide for travel and study. In part one, they discuss how understanding what happened at sacred sites can make our time spent there more meaningful. Here's Casey Griffiths interviewing Mary Jane Woodger.
This is Casey Griffiths. I'm here with Mary Jane Woodger, and we're talking about a book series that we actually wrote together.
Yes.
This series is called Search, Ponder, and Pray. It's a guide for travel and study, and there's 4 volumes, New England, Historic Kirtland, Missouri, and Illinois, and you and I are the co-authors of the New England and Missouri volumes, and the Illinois volume with a nice gentleman called Brian Reddy, who is he used to be a minister who converted to the church. Brian's delightful. And then another book on historic Kirtland that was written by Damon Barr. He's a BYU professor who was a missionary in Kirtland, and Thomas Ardema. Thomas is the CES director out and around that area. So, boy, the books turned out pretty good. I hope you're happy with them, Mary Jane.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I think they turned out better than I even thought they would.
Oh,
so
very good. And tell us a little bit about the purpose of this project. Why did you think why did we think? I guess I'm going to have to phrase these questions this way. Why did we think that there needed to be a new guide to the church history sites?
Well, I will go back to experiences I've had at historic sites, and my father was an incredible history buff. But I remember going to sites, and we would just hope there would be someone there who would, know the background of the site, and we'd kind of, hitch ourselves on the tour
Right.
and act like we were supposed to belong, And then if we ended up somewhere where there wasn't a tour, then my dad would try and fish into his vast, limited memory of what happened there. And we just thought, wouldn't it be wonderful, especially in this age, to provide something as if you had the best tour guide possible. You had someone there with you telling you the background of the site. Because if you don't know that background, it's just another piece of land without really knowing what happened there. And this provides that as if people, when they go to those historic sites, as if they have the best tour guide with them, as if they have those primary sources with them that historians talk about and can refer to. And it makes all the difference in the experience that you have if you know truly what happened there.
Yeah, some of the sites that you go to, you pull up and there's a visitor center and there's sister missionaries and there's golf carts and it's really a lovely experience. And then there's some sites, I'm thinking of the Missouri sites in particular, where you show up and
there's not much.
There's maybe a little signage, but unless you have a little bit of background. And I guess the other reason we brought this up was a lot of church history site guides are directions on how to get there.
Yeah, it's the days before GPS, and they're getting you to the place, and that in our generation is not necessary.
Yeah,
and so we were able to much more focus on those important things that took place there. We don't want to take the place of the missionaries that are there. We just want to enlarge that.
So I'm anxious to hear a little bit about, you said your dad. Do you remember visiting some of these sites when you were
absolutely.
a young woman?
I remember when I was 12, we took the church history circuit and went back east. What I remember more than anything at the age of 12 is the spirit that I felt at the sites. The church has done studies and has found that, if you're a parent and if you can get your child to one of those sites, it is a testimony builder because of what the Spirit can do. But also, if you have a book like these with the background of the history of the church, that is just compounded many times with our young people as they can visit the site, feel the Spirit there, but then receive the knowledge of what happened there and why it's important not only to them in the church, but why it was important to the Lord and why it's important to the restoration of the gospel.
Are there any of the sites you remember with your family that stand out in particular to you?
The Sacred Grove, definitely. And I think because that's one that has been a constant, that I've gone back at different stages of my young life and had different experiences there because of what I was going through. But the other one, as you talk about there being nothing there, really, but the spirit that I felt at the Adam-ondi-Ahman as a 12-year-old. But I didn't know why I was feeling what I was feeling. I knew a few things.
Yeah.
But you add the knowledge of not only what has happened there anciently during Joseph Smith's time, but also as we wrote about Adam-ondi-Ahman in these books, we talk about what's going to happen there.
Yeah, you wrote the chapter on Adam-ondi-Ahman. I think it's okay if I say that here.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
We divided up the labor, and you were the author of that chapter. And I remember this is an astounding kind of treatment where you walk through everything about Adam-ondi-Ahman and what its history is. And this is one site in particular, and this tends to happen with sites in general, that a lot of maybe mystique has built up around what's going to happen there, what makes it so special. Give us an example here. If we were walking through a site like Adam-ondi-Ahman, what are some of the primary things that you would want us to know about the site and what makes it so special?
Well, I think the reason for me that Adam-ondi-Ahman is so unique is because it almost is like it's almost like the endowment session.
Mm-hmm.
It is the whole plan of the gospel on the earth, starting with Adam, of course, that it's there, that he will call his family together and bless them. And then it goes clear through, the restoration as Joseph comes and says, yeah, this is the place. This is where that happened. And then he also will say, but, and then he will go to the New Testament and he will talk about when the Savior will come to Adam-ondi-Ahman and receive the keys. And of course, with Joseph, he will find this altar.
Now, when they first arrived at Adam-ondi-Ahman, they found some altars there, right? That's where a lot of the stories are tied back to.
And it is there, and they called it Spring Hill at the time. It's there that Joseph will say, this is the remains of a Nephite-ish. That's a hard word to say, Nephite-ish.
Nephite-ish,
altar and tower. That Joseph knew that by revelation prophecy. So here you have this tie back. First we're tying back to the Pearl of Great Price in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and now we're tying it to the Book of Mormon. So it's just such a unique location. And then, of course, one of the sad things about Adam-ondi-Ahman is, of course, when the saints were extradited out of Missouri. And the extermination order and all the sad persecution and horrible things that took place there. And then it's such a place of faith that those saints always knew that we would return. You just learn so much about obedience and how to handle persecution and how to keep your testimony strong from that location. But more than anything else, I love that Adam, again, will preside over a council in Adam-ondi-Ahman in the millennium.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've done with these books, which I think is so important, is we have put in what we call mini devotionals.
Tell us what those are.
And so those are just, they're kind of likened unto us. And so we say, here you are at this site, and here's some things you can think about and talk about and learn. And then we have questions usually with them, almost as if we're there teaching our classes about what happened at this site. And I love the little mini devotional that I guess I put in. Okay, but,
let's hear it. Yeah.
One of the things that I said is, as Elder McConkie said, that Adam-ondi-Ahman is the best kept secret set forth in the revealed word. And I just talk about in that mini devotional what Elder McConkie said, and then I say, what are the images and the details associated with the story of Adam-ondi-Ahman that we've just covered? And how does that remind you of Christ and his sacrifice and your relationship with Christ as Adam's relationship is with Christ? So we have these, I guess I could call them doctrinal mini devotionals, where you're not only experiencing the Spirit, you're not only learning the history, but then you're likening those things that can be learned to yourself. And I think that is one of the best parts of the book, is those little mini devotionals where you're at the site and you've just discussed what happened there, and then you want to discuss what's going to happen to me there at the site.
Yeah, because, and I'm interjecting more than I should, but I am the co-author.
Please do.
I think one of the motives behind us writing this book was I was at the Morley farm in Kirtland, which is this lovely little church history site. There's nothing there that was there when the Morleys were there. But it's one of the first places Joseph Smith lived when he came to Kirtland, and where Father Morley, even before Joseph came to Kirtland, tried to figure out a way to live with all things in common, like the scriptures say. I was leading a tour group there, and this little family pulled up in their van, and they all piled out, and I saw, mom, dad, and kids, and he sort of looked around, and, at the time there were no missionaries, and there was no signage, basically, that said, here's...
Yeah, this is why this is.
And he didn't know that you were supposed to walk up the trail to where the farmhouse was, and that's where there was signage. Sorry, the schoolhouse, not the farmhouse. And so I saw the guy kind of go, and here's the Morley farm, and then pile back in his van with his family. And first of all, I'm really touched when parents will do that for their kids. But I also thought, oh, I wish he knew a little bit more.
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
Morley farm is one of those locations near Kirtland where the Father and the Son appeared in vision.
Yes.
Where Joseph Smith said, this church will fill the whole of North and South America. It will fill the world. Where they have this astounding conference where several people prophesy and the first high priests are ordained. It all happens in that location. And that wonderful mother and father just didn't know.
Yeah.
They had come and they sacrificed to go to the sacred place, but then they just didn't quite know how sacred it was.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm blowing it out. Maybe they were late for an appointment or something.
No, I don't think you are. I don't think you are. I think you're right on the mark. And isn't it great that if he would have had that book, even though you were there, right there, but if he would have had our book,
Yeah.
then, he could have said all those things.
Yeah.
And then the kids would go, oh, okay, I guess it's worth stopping here. Let me just add one other thing that,
Yeah, please.
with Adam-ondi-Ahman. I think one of the other things about the books, because I'm more of a 20th century church historian, but we also, in the books, combine what's happened there since. So one thing, for instance, Adam-ondi-Ahman, President McKay had this counselor that was never an apostle, and his name was Adam-ondi-Ahman, and he just was kind of an apostle without a quorum. And one day President McKay was asked, what's this deal with Adam-ondi-Ahman? Who is he? And President McKay said, oh, Adam-ondi-Ahman is an apostle who will prepare the land of Adam-ondi-Ahman for the second coming.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, that kind of thing, I don't think is well known in the church, and maybe that doesn't mean anything, but that means a lot to me, that the Lord called this special exception of this apostle just to get the land ready. So we not only are going to look at these sites from Joseph Smith's day, but having taught church history, we can also tell what's happened there up to our day. For instance, where the Aaronic priesthood was restored. They used to have a plaque there, the church did, that said, around here is where it took place. And we have George Albert Smith going back and saying, take the word around out. Here's where it happened. So I think that's an addition too. It's not just what happened in Joseph's day, but what's happened since.
Yeah.
To add to that knowledge.
That's interesting that you bring up the Aaronic priesthood site. Now it's just called the Priesthood Restoration Site.
Yeah.
But there is a place that you go there called the Sugar Maple Grove that they treat the same way they treat the Sacred Grove, which basically the rules with the Sacred Grove are you can go in, you can take pictures, but please be reverent and don't film anything in here. I was surprised when I got to the Priesthood Restoration Site for the first time. They took me to the Sugar Maple Grove, and they explained the reasons why they think this is the most likely place that John the Baptist appeared. It's not a down to, hey, X marks the spot. But just in general, I think the reasoning was they probably didn't go to the banks of the river because on May 15th, barges are coming up and down the river about every 5 minutes. They said they went to a woods, and this would have been one of the only places where the trees weren't cleared. And they figured out that that was the spot. And so they treated it with this incredible reverence. And it was kind of neat for me to encounter a second sacred grove. At the same time, these sites are living. I mean, whenever I take somebody to the Sacred Grove, the first comment is, it's beautiful. And the second comment is, there's a lot of bugs here.
Yeah.
And so one thing is that lived-in experience that it's not just that everything is a majestic museum that you can walk into. These are living sites where a person can go and experience the wildlife, and the church has just done a magnificent job, especially the last couple of years, trying to make the sites look the way they would have looked when those sacred things occurred there.
Yeah, restoring them accurately is a real focus of the church historic sites.
Yeah, and they've done a wonderful job.
Yeah, and I would just say this too, as what I would hope would happen with these books is that, people would go to the sites and that they would reflect, review the events, the personalities associated with each site, and that will make them more special. But I also think, as you talked about reverence, that adds to the reverence of a site. And we all know that reverence invites revelation. And so your children can have those experiences that I had at those sites, feeling the Spirit.
Yeah. It's really kind of, I used to spend hours and hours getting my classroom just right when I was a seminary teacher. But when you go to one of these places, it's such a classroom experience where all the sights and sounds and the smells all combine together to sort of transport you in time. And I'm not embarrassed to say this. I've probably been to the Sacred Grove 10 or 11 times. Last time I went, I got lost.
Wow.
I don't know if they changed the trails or anything. But I got lost, and instead of worrying about, am I going to find my tour? I just had a few minutes where I was walking. And I don't know how they do it there, but for some reason the trail system works so that it feels like you're alone most of the time.
Yeah.
It's
That's
totally
interesting
magical.
You said that. Yeah.
But I just had a few moments in the Sacred Grove and had a few minutes to sit and reflect. Why did he come here? If there's not a temple on the earth and you're a little farm boy and you can't go to Jerusalem, how do you make a place sacred? And for Joseph, he seemed to be intrinsically drawn to these natural places where God had, in effect, created a temple for him to be in.
I really appreciate what you said about you feel like you're alone. And one of the things that I included is an experience by Elder Christofferson, as he was a participant in the Hill Cumorah pageant as a youth. And he talks about the experience he had going into the Sacred Grove, being alone and seeking revelation. I love that in the books we include not only what happened to Joseph, but also what has happened there historically, and we're hoping will happen to you as you're there also.
If you're interested in more peer-reviewed, high-quality gospel scholarship about Latter-day Saint scripture, history, or doctrine, such as this publication, check out BYU's Religious Studies Center. The RSC recently released a new book called 100th Part, Exploring the History and Teachings of the Book of Mormon, edited by BYU Religious Education faculty Avram R. Shannon and Carrie Hull. This volume represents a treasure trove of Book of Mormon knowledge published by the Religious Studies Center. The title of this book, 100th Part, is a phrase employed by several Book of Mormon authors to indicate that they were providing only a small portion of what could have been written. The book begins with an essay by President Dallin H. Oaks on the importance of engaging with historical claims made within and by the Book of Mormon. The rest of the volume is divided into 4 main topical divisions: doctrinal contributions, church and priesthood, cultural contributions and close readings, and post-Book of Mormon readings on the text. 100th Part is distributed by Deseret Book and available at rsc.byu.edu. We've been listening to Mary Jane Woodger share thoughts on visiting church history sites. In Part 2, we listened to Drs. Woodger and Griffiths discuss experiential learning and how being on sites can make a significant difference in our ability to understand the events and people connected with those sites.
Part of this has to do with a principle we talk a lot about at BYU called experiential learning.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about what that is and how it might relate to a church history site? How does having an experience help a person learn?
As one of my dear colleagues said, experiential learning is not sit and learn, it's go and do. And I remember Tony Sweat said, I like to teach with my feet, meaning that you're there, you're involved, and it's an experience instead of just trading forth facts or information, but you experience it. And so if you can get a child to the site, then like you said, they experience all those things, and the learning is, so much greater in such an incredible way. I had a little experience in the Joseph Smith home.
Mm-hmm.
What it was I was thinking about Joseph and Emma, and I felt for just a minute what Joseph felt about his wife. I can't explain it. Spiritual experiences take place in seconds. But I was just filled with such a love that he had for her. And I remember I was at the bottom of the stairs looking up, and it's kind of in my mind's eye, I thought, I wonder if Joseph ever stood at the bottom of these stairs and looked up at Emma.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was filled with that feeling. I don't think I would have had that experience anywhere else. That's experiential learning,
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it as if you are there at the same time. We don't get that in a classroom.
Yeah. And you and I work in classrooms.
Yeah.
Classrooms can be very effective, but there's this wonderful scripture in the book of Moses where the Lord says, all things are created to bear witness of me. And so often it is in these natural settings. I mean, I've worked with young men and young women. We took a carload of priests and they were called laurels then.
Yeah.
To Nauvoo, and they spent 3 days being bitten by mosquitoes.
Yeah.
And showering
Chiggers.
in a KOA, and they came away with something different than if I had just sat there and said, "Hey, here's my slideshow about Nauvoo." They walked the roads where the saints walked, and they did baptisms in the rebuilt temple, and it just really changed a lot of things. In fact, the thing I'm proudest of is some of those young women on the trip saw the sister missionaries and felt, hey, I could do this kind of thing. And now a couple of them are back from their missions, and they've done an outstanding job, and they're getting married, and they're starting their families. And I can't help but think that going to the place, going and doing was what kind of helped them. It wasn't just me or this one trip.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet, but it was one of those things that really helped them along the way.
Well, they can't help but feel, and then when you increase the knowledge of what happened there and they have the feeling there is a spirit about certain places.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that there are sacred places. And for the Latter-day Saints, it's not just Jerusalem, it's not just Bethlehem. It's Vermont, Sharon, Vermont. It's, as you said, the Isaac Morley Farm. It's the Sacred Grove.
Yeah.
It's Kirtland, Ohio.
Yeah.
There's a spirit there.
If you're interested in reading Search, Ponder, and Pray, a guide for travel and study, we've provided a link to the books in the show notes and on our website, whyreligion.byu.edu. There you can also learn more about Dr. Mary Jane Woodger and find links to some of her other publications. You might also enjoy going back to episode 15 on the Why Religion podcast, where Dr. Woodger was interviewed on the Moses of Czechoslovakia, a fascinating episode in modern church history. Okay, we've arrived at our last segment, part 3, where we get a little more personal. Here, Mary Jane talks about her recent experiences learning more about modern international church history and how this has affected her testimony.
Well, Mary Jane, as you know, the last part of our conversations here, we tend to talk about something personal. And we've worked together for a number of years, and I was your student way
You
back
were.
then.
That ages me, Casey.
No, you haven't aged at all. You're just as...
that was the right thing to say.
I'm amazed. You're frozen in time, as I'm sure I am too. I must still look like an 18-year-old that doesn't know what he's doing. But you travel a lot. I remember, you casually saying to me, "Oh, I just got back from the Cook Islands," or, this summer I'm going to go to, I think this summer you went to Scandinavia.
Yes.
And how many places did you stop while you were there?
Well, we were in 5 countries, but we took 13 flights in 14 days, so we were all over the place.
And how many interviews? What was the purpose of this trip? This wasn't leisure. This wasn't for fun.
I'm working on I want to do the history of the church in Scandinavia from the time that they were supposed to quit immigrating. Okay. And also I'm looking at a wonderful prophecy by President Hinckley called The Second Harvest, where President Hinckley prophesied that in Scandinavia we would have thousands upon thousands join the church, even more than they did in the 1800s. So we conducted 50 interviews while I was there.
Wow.
And spoke to them specifically about the Second Harvest and their experience in Scandinavia. And we were really looking at those members that have been the backbone of the church there, leaders and others that have kind of been the pioneers that stayed back, didn't come to Utah and stayed back in the 20th century. And I just... I had one man start to weep during the interview, and he said, "I didn't expect to feel like this with just an interview. I didn't expect this." And for me, there have been times when I have been doing research, and I thought, "Well, this would just be a great trip." Sounds like a great trip to go there. And the Lord has just orchestrated some things where He's said, "No. This is research that you need to do. These people need to know that this is a worldwide church and their experience is just as valuable as yours in Salt Lake City, Utah."
Yeah, because when we wrote these books, it was kind of the greatest hits of church history, right?
Yeah.
But one important thing to understand is that New England, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois were just the beginning.
Yes.
There's amazing things happening all over the world.
Yes.
How has travel kind of helped you see the hand of the Lord in different places around the world?
Well, I would say, we were looking at sacred sites in these books. There are sacred sites in, I think, almost every country where the Lord has orchestrated the gathering of Israel, as President Nelson says, is the greatest work today. And He is orchestrating that in an amazing way in so many places. And I just feel like it's so important to have that documented. His mighty hand as the gospel goes forth to all peoples in all climes, in all nations. Just meeting people is just phenomenal. I interviewed in Norway a man, I think he was 96. He had 7 children. And he had helped build the chapel that we were sitting in interviewing. And he had then been the custodian of that chapel, and we used to have custodians. And he just had such a tie to this chapel. And then he told me that all 7 of his children had left the church and just wept. And then I said to him, how do you do that? How difficult this is for you? And he said, "The church is true. I've got promises, they'll return." And I just thought, what an amazing. And the interesting thing is one of his sons who had left the church brought him to that interview. And when we were done, the son was in tears. And it's things like that you can't help but have your testimony increased.
So most of our listeners are probably close enough to go to New England or Missouri or Ohio. But if you're not, no matter where you're at, church history is being created everywhere. And 200 years from now, we'll probably have sacred historical sites in the Cook Islands or in Norway, or I've been to a few places that I think are good candidates too, in Tonga and Stornoway. Just got back from these islands off the coast of Scotland, and we went sailing into the bay, and there's one church spire, and someone said, "Oh, is that our church?" jokingly. And I remember turning to them and saying, "We're not the only church," but it was our church, actually.
Love it.
And we stopped in and had a lovely visit with the members, and was just so touched that this little island, in the North Sea, where it's cold most of the year, the fire of faith is burning there. It's just beautiful to see those stories.
I just included a man that was a bishop. He talked about the Cook Islands. He's a bishop in Aitutaki, and I just included him in another book that I'm writing on quiet disciples, and he talked about the sacrifices. He'd gone back to Idaho, and there's no career for him there, but he really felt he needed to go home, and the great service he's doing as a bishop in that little island. It just can't help but increase your testimony.
Thanks for listening to Why Religion. This podcast is a production of religious education at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. My name is John Hilton, the host and producer. The Why Religion podcast team also includes from BYU Religious Education, Professors Janet Erickson, Casey Griffiths, Jared Halverson, Travis Searle, Ryan Sharp, Hank Smith, and Brad Wilcox. Recording, mixing, and original music was done by BYU student Alec Galloway. Say hi, Alec.
Hi, guys.
Original music and scoring for the Why Religion podcast was also created by the fabulous BYU student musicians Grant Cagle,
Sam Clausen,
Colette Jones,
Alistair Scheuermann.
If you enjoy what you've heard, please like and subscribe to Why Religion and leave us a rating. This really helps others discover this podcast. And join us next time as we continue to bring the everyday Latter-day Saint fascinating gospel studies done by BYU religion professors to enlighten your mind and strengthen your faith in Jesus Christ.